For centuries, powerful men claimed to harness a secret force within, a source of strength, clarity, and unstoppable confidence. It's called semen retention, and today, it's making a fierce comeback. But is it ancient wisdom, or modern myth? Can holding back really sharpen your mind, supercharge your energy, and reshape your life? Stay with us, because what you're about to discover might change the way you see your body, and your power, forever. In every generation, there exists a quiet thread of wisdom. A current beneath the noise of modern life, passed in whispers among seekers and sages. Ancient texts inscribed on brittle parchment, oral traditions carried by elders, and the hushed conversations of mystics have long spoken of a force within man, a vital current of energy capable of shaping destiny itself. It was said to reside in the very essence of life, a seed of creation so potent it could fashion worlds, spark new lineages, or fuel a man's rise from obscurity to legend. In Eastern temples and desert hermitages, among warrior clans and wandering scholars, this force was guarded and revered. Known by many names, Jing, Ohos, vital fluid, life seed, today, it's most plainly called semen. For the modern man, dulled by relentless routines, endless scrolling, and a culture that trivializes discipline, the idea of guarding such a force might seem quaint or obsolete. Yet there's a growing movement of men, across continents and generations, returning to this ancient practice in search of something lost. They claim to feel sharper, more energized, unburdened by the weight of compulsions. They speak of clearer minds, stronger bodies, and a steadiness in the soul. To them, semen retention isn't mere abstinence, it's a reclaiming of self. But what is the truth behind these claims? Can withholding one's life force truly shape health, character, and destiny? Or is it merely superstition dressed in the garments of ancient wisdom? Tonight, we'll journey through time and thought, science and spirit, to trace the origins of semen retention and explore its place in the modern world. Settle in, for what you are about to hear may challenge your assumptions and stir something old within you, a call from the marrow of your being to remember a truth long obscured. Our story begins far from the neon lights of the present day, in a world where man lived by the rhythms of earth and sky. It was in the foothills of ancient India that the earliest records of semen retention appeared. The yogis of the Vedic tradition spoke of brahmacharya, a discipline not merely of celibacy, but of preserving one's vital energies to achieve spiritual awakening. They believed that semen contained the ohos, a subtle essence formed from refined bodily energies, capable of nourishing both body and mind. To the sage Patanjali, whose Yoga Sutras guided seekers for millennia, control over one's passions wasn't a denial of nature, but mastery of it. The yogi who held his seed, it was said, gained not only physical vigor but a radiant mind and transcendent peace. He shone with a vitality visible to those around him, a quiet power unmistakable in its presence. And so it was, from mountaintop ashrams to quiet forest retreats, that men sought to channel this force, believing it could elevate them beyond the base urges of the flesh and into communion with the divine. Centuries later, in the courts of ancient China, a similar philosophy took root. The Taoists spoke of Jing, the vital essence inherited from one's parents, finite in supply yet essential for life. The seminal fluid was seen as its most concentrated form, and to squander it was to weaken the body's defenses and hasten decay. Taoist alchemists devised elaborate sexual practices not to suppress desire, but to cultivate it wisely. Through techniques of retention, circulating sexual energy throughout the body without release, practitioners believed they could strengthen organs, sharpen the senses, and extend life itself. Their texts, preserved in fragments and commentaries, spoke of emperors who fathered heirs yet maintained robust health into old age by mastering the art of retention. They warned of the dangers of excessive indulgence, equating loss of semen with loss of vitality, spirit, and fortune. While modern medicine may view these practices with skepticism, it is worth noting that ancient traditions across the globe, independent of one another, reached strikingly similar conclusions about the importance of preserving life's essential fluid. Among the samurai of feudal Japan, self-restraint in all matters, including sexual release, was prized as a means of cultivating inner strength and clarity of purpose. A warrior's discipline was measured not only by his swordsmanship but by his command over his own desires. In ancient Egypt, hieroglyphs depict rituals and practices hinting at the sacredness of generative fluids. In indigenous cultures across Africa and the Americas, medicine men and elders taught young men to understand and honor their seed, not as a burden but a gift to be wisely stewarded. What then is it about this act, the simple yet profound choice to withhold, that so captivated the wise throughout history? Perhaps it is because to master one's passions is to master the self. In a world governed by impulse, the man who can command his own nature holds a rare and precious power. As we journey forward into the modern era, we find ourselves in a paradoxical age. Never before has humanity known such abundance, yet never before have we been so lost in excess. Food, entertainment, carnal pleasures, all at the tap of a screen. And with this flood of stimuli has come a dulling of the senses, a weakening of will. A quiet surrender to appetites once held in check by necessity or creed. For the modern man, the struggle is not one of survival, but of sovereignty over himself. It was in the early 20th century that Western thinkers began to take interest in the practices of the East. Figures like Nikola Tesla, famously celibate, spoke of preserving creative energies by abstaining from carnal indulgence. He claimed that his greatest ideas were born not in moments of physical pleasure, but in the clarity of disciplined solitude. Sigmund Freud, though critical of repression, acknowledged the potent force of libido as a driver of human behavior, noting that the sublimation of sexual energy could fuel great works of art, science, and statecraft. In more recent decades, movements like NoFap have arisen, advocating for men to abstain from pornography and masturbation, citing benefits such as increased confidence, sharper focus, improved mood, and better interpersonal relationships. Though often dismissed by mainstream voices, countless personal testimonies echo themes found in ancient texts, that mastery over one's sexual impulses can lead to unexpected clarity and strength. But what does modern science say of these claims? The evidence, while limited, offers intriguing glimpses. A study conducted in 2003 found that men who abstained from ejaculation for 7 days experienced a notable spike in testosterone levels, peaking around the 7th day before returning to baseline. While the long-term significance remains unclear, it suggests a temporary physiological response to retention. Neuroscience has shown that the dopamine pathways activated by sexual release are the same involved in addiction cycles. Constant overstimulation through pornography and frequent release can dull the brain's reward system, leading to decreased motivation, focus, and satisfaction in other areas of life. Conversely, when these impulses are restrained, the brain begins to resensitize to natural rewards, the satisfaction of completing a task, the pleasure of meaningful conversation, the quiet joy of a sunrise. In this light, semen retention might be less about biochemical magic and more about restoring balance to a system overstimulated by modern excess. What's more, psychological studies affirm that self-imposed discipline, in any form, enhances self-efficacy, the belief in one's ability to exert control over one's own behavior and environment. This belief, more than any hormone or neurotransmitter, shapes a man's outcomes in life. The man who says no to temptation, whether it be in the form of empty calories, idle distractions, or fleeting pleasures, affirms to himself that he is sovereign over his nature. That belief becomes action, action becomes habit, and habit becomes character. So, in the quiet hours of morning, before the world stirs, or in the evening, as the last light fades, the modern practitioner of semen retention is not merely resisting an urge. He is cultivating a self-respect too often lost in an age of indulgence. And this discipline bleeds into other domains, a newfound focus at work, patience in conversation, resilience in the face of adversity. What begins as a physical restraint ripples outward, reshaping mind and spirit. Yet it must be said, and ancient wisdom agrees, that to suppress desire entirely is folly. The Taoists warned that repression leads to stagnation, illness, and imbalance. The aim is not denial, but mastery. To choose when and how one expresses one's energies, and to do so with intention rather than compulsion. In this, semen retention is not a commandment but an art. The man who learns to listen to his body, to understand his rhythms, and to direct his urges rather than be ruled by them, walks a path not of asceticism but of dynamic balance. As we move deeper into this story, we will explore personal testimonies, practical methods, the potential risks, and the deeper metaphysical implications of retaining life's most potent force. Stay with me, for what comes next delves into the heart of what it means to be a man in command of himself. As dawn breaks upon the cityscape, and the quiet hum of early traffic stirs the streets, a solitary figure stands before his reflection. In that mirror stares not just a man, but the sum of his choices. Lines upon his face, a certain heaviness in the eyes, a longing beneath the bravado, all marks of a life lived, of indulgences taken and disciplines neglected. For many, this moment arrives unnoticed. A vague dissatisfaction, shrugged away with the next cup of coffee or scroll of the thumb. But for a few, it becomes a spark. The question forms, quiet but persistent, what if I reclaimed control? What if I harnessed what I so carelessly gave away? This is the modern man's quiet reckoning. In a world that praises instant gratification and mocks restraint, the decision to hold back becomes an act of quiet rebellion. And in that rebellion, a man might rediscover parts of himself long buried beneath the noise. The testimonies of those who embark on this path often follow similar arcs. In the beginning, there is resistance, the body, conditioned by habit, clamors for release. The mind justifies, tempts, bargains. In these early days, many falter. But those who press on, even for a week, report a subtle shift. Energy, once scattered, seems to gather. Mornings come with a touch more vigor. Tasks long postponed find themselves completed. A certain steadiness of gaze returns, one less easily distracted by fleeting allurements. The world does not change, traffic still snarls. Bills still arrive, but the man moving through it does. By the second week, many speak of a newfound clarity. It is not that desires vanish, but rather they are seen for what they are, momentary currents in a deeper sea. Cravings lose their tyranny. The mind, unburdened by constant pursuit, turns toward old ambitions, long neglected crafts, or unspoken conversations that matter. The body too responds. Workouts feel sharper, recovery swifter. The face takes on a certain brightness. The eyes a light harder to quantify but impossible to ignore. Colleagues and acquaintances, without knowing why, seem to lean in a little closer, sensing a subtle shift in presence. By the third week and beyond, the changes often deepen into the intangible. A sense of command returns, not over others, but over oneself. Decisions come with less hesitation. Words spoken hold more weight, not by volume, but by their rootedness in conviction. It is here that many men rediscover the old truths. That masculinity, in its healthiest form, is not dominance over others but mastery of one's own nature. That strength lies not merely in muscle or bravado, but in the quiet restraint before impulse, the steady hand amid chaos. Ancient texts spoke of this often. The Bhagavad Gita, that timeless Indian epic, places at its heart a warrior, Arjuna, tormented by duty and desire. The god Krishna counsels him not toward indulgence nor ascetic denial, but toward disciplined action, unshaken by craving or fear. Yogastha kuru karmani, he says, established in self, perform your duty. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu observes, he who conquers others is strong, he who conquers himself is mighty. Semen retention, then, becomes not merely a biological experiment, but a practice in self-conquest. Modern science, while cautious, offers supporting glimpses into this ancient understanding. Neurobiologists have documented the ways in which frequent ejaculation can desensitize the brain's reward pathways, leading to a kind of pleasure fatigue. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation and reward, operates on a system of anticipation and fulfillment. When overstimulated, the brain's baseline pleasure threshold rises, making once meaningful experiences seem dull. Conversely, periods of abstinence have been shown to recalibrate these pathways, restoring the brain's sensitivity to natural pleasures, the warmth of sunlight, the satisfaction of a good meal, the richness of human conversation. In this sense, semen retention might not so much add new pleasures as restore a man's ability to savor those already present. On a hormonal level, as previously mentioned, studies indicate that abstaining for several days can lead to temporary elevations in testosterone, a hormone intricately linked to vitality, mood, confidence, and sexual health. While the spike normalizes over time, many practitioners report that even brief abstinence helps them reconnect with a sense of primal vigor, a feeling modern life too often suppresses. Yet the benefits reported are not solely chemical. Psychological literature affirms that voluntary discipline, in any form, enhances what psychologists term internal locus of control, the belief that one's actions shape one's destiny. Men who cultivate this belief, research shows, experience lower rates of depression, higher life satisfaction, and greater resilience in the face of adversity. It stands to reason, then, that a practice like semen retention, requiring daily choice and moment-to-moment awareness, would serve as powerful training for this mindset. But what of the critics? Detractors argue that repression leads to dysfunction, that denying natural urges breeds neurosis, or that such practices stem from outdated moral codes rather than empirical wisdom. And they are not entirely wrong. History is littered with cautionary tales of those who, in pursuit of purity, descended into fanaticism. The ancient sages themselves warned of the dangers of imbalance. The Taoists spoke of yin and yang, the necessity of both action and rest, indulgence and restraint, for a life of harmony. The yogis taught that brahmacharya, often misinterpreted as celibacy, truly meant moderation and conscious management of one's energies, sexual and otherwise. Complete suppression, devoid of understanding, could lead to stagnation of spirit and body alike. Modern psychology concurs. Sexual desire, like hunger or thirst, is a natural drive. The question is not whether to deny it, but how to engage it wisely. Healthy sexuality, expressed within meaningful relationships or acts of love, can be a source of profound connection, joy, and even spiritual experience. Thus, the path of semen retention is not one of denial, but of discernment. The man who chooses to withhold does so not because desire is evil, but because mastery offers a richness no momentary pleasure can match. And herein lies the art. Some practitioners follow strict regimens, 7 days, 14 days, a month. Others adopt a more intuitive approach, abstaining until they feel their energy peak, then choosing when and how to release. In Taoist sexual kung fu, men learn to separate orgasm from ejaculation, allowing for moments of intimacy and pleasure without the subsequent loss of vital fluid. Such techniques, while requiring study and patience, offer a middle path between indulgence and abstinence. What unites them is intentionality. The modern man, bombarded by imagery, expectation, and the relentless commodification of desire, often finds his sexuality hijacked by forces beyond his awareness. To reclaim this most intimate domain is to reclaim the seat of one's power. For some, this journey catalyzes changes far beyond the bedroom. Careers revitalized, estranged relationships mended, creative projects resurrected. The discipline forged in one aspect of life bleeds inevitably into others. Writers from ancient Rome to contemporary motivational speakers have noted this phenomenon. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote of the necessity of mastering desire to live freely, observing, "He who is a slave to his passions cannot be free." In the modern age, authors like Robert Greene in The 48 Laws of Power and the Laws of Human Nature echo this timeless truth. Those who govern themselves hold sway over their world. And so the practice of semen retention, however obscure or controversial it may seem, continues to attract those weary of a life lived at the mercy of impulse. Some come seeking physical benefits, increased energy, sharper focus, improved physique. Others pursue emotional resilience, a buffer against the irritability and fatigue often born of overstimulation. A growing number embark upon it for spiritual reasons, viewing the preservation of life force as a means of deepening meditation, enhancing intuition, or connecting with a higher self. Mystics across traditions have spoken of sexual energy as a conduit to the divine, a force capable of awakening latent faculties within the soul. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, believed that creative and spiritual energy were rooted in what he termed the libido, a broader concept than mere sexual desire. He argued that when redirected inward, this energy could fuel art, invention, and personal transformation. Modern anecdotal accounts support this. Men report bursts of creative output after periods of abstinence, projects long postponed finally coming to fruition, or insights arising in quiet moments once dulled by distraction. Yet it would be a disservice to paint this path as one of easy triumph. The road of self-mastery is littered with setbacks, and those who walk it must confront not only temptation, but the deeper fears and insecurities that indulgence so often masks. For many, the act of release becomes a balm against loneliness, stress, or unspoken discontent. To abstain is to face these emotions in their raw form. It is to sit in the stillness of one's own company and ask difficult questions. What am I avoiding? What emptiness am I seeking to fill? In these moments, semen retention ceases to be a mere practice and becomes a mirror, reflecting not just urges, but the man beneath them. And it is in this confrontation that growth occurs. Ancient rites of passage, long stripped from modern culture, often involved solitude, deprivation, and trials of endurance. Not for the sake of suffering, but to strip away artifice and reveal the unadorned self. In some small way, practices like semen retention recreate this crucible. They offer modern men, adrift in a sea of ease, a chance to test themselves. To discover what remains when compulsion is set aside. To find whether, in the absence of fleeting pleasure, something sturdier endures. And for many, it does. As we continue, we will hear the voices of men from across time and culture. Those who chose mastery over indulgence, and glean from their wisdom. We will explore practical methods, potential pitfalls, and the quiet transformations that arise when a man chooses to command his most primal force. So let us press on, for the path ahead winds through ancient wisdom, modern science, and the untamed landscapes of the human spirit. In the quiet corners of the world, far from the glare of city lights, men have long gathered to share their journeys, whispered tales of struggle, triumph, and transformation. These stories, though diverse in detail, share a common thread, the discovery that true power begins not without, but within. Consider the story of a man named Elias, a contemporary seeker from the bustling streets of New York. Once caught in the endless cycle of distractions, late nights spent scrolling through hollow feeds, mornings blurred by exhaustion, and relationships fragmented by superficial connection, he found himself at a crossroads. Elias felt the familiar call of change not as a thunderclap, but as a persistent hum beneath the chaos. Intrigued by tales of semen retention, he embarked on his own experiment. The early days tested his resolve, urges rose like tides threatening to pull him under. Yet he persisted. As the weeks passed, he noticed subtle shifts. His mind, once scattered and restless, began to settle like a pond undisturbed by wind. Tasks he had long postponed now seemed approachable. His conversations deepened, and he found himself more present with friends and family. Physically, Elias felt an unfamiliar surge of vitality, not the jittery rush of caffeine, but a steady, grounded energy that carried him through long days without the usual slump. He rekindled passions abandoned to time, painting, jogging, moments of silent meditation. Elias's story is not unique, but it is illuminating. It reflects a pattern seen across cultures and eras. When a man learns to steward his vital energies, the dividends extend beyond the body to mind and spirit. Across the ocean, In rural Japan, a farmer named Kenji shares a similar tale. Raised in a tradition that honored discipline and simplicity, Kenji embraced retention as part of a holistic lifestyle, blending meditation, physical labor, and mindful eating. For Kenji, the practice was less about resisting pleasure and more about honoring the rhythm of life. He spoke of an energy that nourished his work in the fields, his relationships, and his inner peace. In his late 60s, he remains a figure of quiet strength. A living testament to the power of balance. In urban centers from London to Mumbai, men increasingly turn to these ancient practices, drawn not by fad or fashion, but by a deep yearning for agency in an age of overwhelm. The modern man's battle is not against external foes, but against distraction, compulsion, and a pervasive sense of fragmentation. Semen retention, in this light, becomes a tool, one among many, to reclaim wholeness. It is important, however, to approach this practice with discernment and care. Like any path promising transformation, it is not without potential pitfalls. One such pitfall lies in misunderstanding the nature of desire itself. Sexual energy is not a beast to be chained, but a river to be guided. Ignoring or suppressing it without awareness can lead to frustration, resentment, or confusion. Another risk is the conflation of retention with moral superiority. Some fall into the trap of equating abstinence with virtue, cultivating judgment rather than compassion. True mastery is humble, rooted in self-knowledge, not arrogance. Moreover, men with certain health conditions or psychological challenges should approach semen retention thoughtfully, ideally consulting healthcare professionals. The goal is not rigid abstinence at all costs, but sustainable balance. Practically speaking, many find that integrating meditation, breathwork, and mindful movement alongside retention greatly enhances the experience. These practices help anchor the mind, calm the nervous system, and cultivate presence. Tantric traditions offer fascinating methods, teaching men to separate orgasm from ejaculation, a skill requiring patience but rewarding with heightened intimacy and energy conservation. These teachings emphasize connection, not denial, offering a middle path of conscious engagement. It is also vital to remember that sexuality is multifaceted, encompassing emotional, spiritual, and physical dimensions. Semen retention is but one thread in this rich tapestry. As we examine the modern science behind these ancient claims, a nuanced picture emerges. Research on hormone levels during abstinence shows variability. While some men experience temporary rises in testosterone, others see little change. This suggests that individual differences, lifestyle, diet, and psychological factors play significant roles. Yet the psychological benefits appear more consistent. The practice fosters mindfulness, breaks compulsive patterns, and strengthens self-regulation, qualities deeply linked with mental health and well-being. Interestingly, studies on relationships indicate that men who practice conscious sexual discipline often report improved communication, greater empathy, and more satisfying partnerships. The increased presence and intentionality spill over beyond the bedroom. From a spiritual perspective, traditions across the world have long recognized the power of sexual energy as a sacred force. Whether called Kundalini in Hinduism, Qi in Chinese medicine, or vital force in Western esotericism, this energy, when harnessed, is said to awaken latent faculties of perception, creativity, and healing. Carl Jung's theories on libido as psychic energy further underscore this view. He argued that sublimated sexual energy fuels not just physical health but the creative and spiritual evolution of the individual. Modern practitioners echo this, describing periods of retention as times of intense personal insight, artistic inspiration, and emotional clarity. Yet all agree on one principle: intention is everything. Without clear purpose and compassionate self-awareness, retention risks becoming mere willpower or self-punishment. The journey of semen retention is deeply personal. It asks a man to look inward, to face his shadows and desires without judgment. It invites him to step out of the frenzy of instant gratification and into a steadier, more deliberate rhythm. For some, it is a spiritual awakening. For others, a practical reset. For all, it is a reclamation of sovereignty over one's body and mind. As we approach the final chapters of our exploration, we will delve into practical guidance, how to begin, what to expect, and how to integrate this ancient wisdom into the cadence of modern life. We will also address common misconceptions, the balance of pleasure and restraint, and the subtle art of listening to one's body. In the meantime, consider this: what if your vitality, your creative spark, your clarity of purpose were not found in external achievement or fleeting pleasures, but within the disciplined stewardship of your own life force? What if the key to unlocking a more vibrant, focused, and fulfilled life lay not in addition, but subtraction? Not in constant indulgence, but in conscious restraint? The answer, as history and modern experience suggest, may lie quietly within you, waiting to be claimed. As we've seen, the journey of semen retention is as much about mastering the mind and spirit as it is about the body. Whether you seek greater energy, clearer focus, or deeper self-awareness, this ancient practice offers a path to reclaim your inner power. If you're curious to explore further, approach it with patience, intention, and respect for your own nature. Thank you for joining this journey into timeless wisdom and modern insight. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share, and remember, true strength always begins within. Until next time, take care and stay well.